Hey, it's Don here, Don at Antiques, Uniques, and Metaphysics, and the Buddha. Anyway, I want to talk a few moments about monism. Not monism, but monism as in oneism. And the difference between monism as a philosophical perspective on the nature of the universe and a dualism or a pluralism. So, a lot of folks tend to think of reality as divided up into different essential aspects. Like, it's very common to hear people talk about mind, body, and spirit, right, as sort of three separate things. In addition to that, we might think of having a will, and I got a free will. So maybe the will is even something that we have that's different than mind, body, and spirit, whatever those natures are. And then in addition to that, right, we might have a soul that's even separate from spirit. In fact, some of the ancient traditions thought of soul as something separate from spirit, psyche, and pneuma. So, and in addition to that, there may be a deity, like a god, like the god maybe, who is separate from all of those things as well in terms of essence. And in addition to that, perhaps there are angels that's not of a divine nature, but not of a human nature, right? Maybe their spirit, maybe their soul, but maybe there's something different altogether. I could go on, but that's a good start in terms of understanding a pluralism where there are many separate, distinct essences, right? Essentially different natures that function differently. Mind does stuff that body doesn't do. Body does stuff that mind doesn't do. Body would be, um, fall prey to things like momentum, uh, cause and effect of a physical sort. I can fall down and bruise my knee. But mind, right, doesn't operate under laws of physics. You don't fall down and bruise your mind. You might have a mind issue, although that might be a brain issue, which some believe is different than mind, that we have a mind that's different than our brain. So the point is that we can understand the nature of the universe as having multiple different essences. That becomes problematic, like really problematic. And the reason is because, and if we just want to look at a couple of examples, one would be mind and body. And this problem became famous with Descartes in his famous mind body dilemma. Uh, he concluded that cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, and what I am as a thinking thing is a mind. So Descartes concluded first and foremost that he was a mind that thinks, after he doubted and denied the possibility of everything else. I mean, for all we know, we might be on a table somewhere hooked up into the matrix, right? But there's still a mind there, Descartes concluded. But this body that I'm experiencing may not be real. Think about a dream. In a dream, you're thinking the body's real. It ain't, right? But there is a mind, right, that's doing the dreaming. So that was Descartes' first conclusion was, I think, therefore I am, and what I am is a mind. He then went on and attempted to prove the existence of God in order to verify that the physical world that we experience must be real also, because a God would not deceive us into thinking, right, that there's a real world when there really isn't. So he really felt like God had to be proven in order to justify and acknowledge the existence of a physical world. And therefore, he then goes on and says, and then there is matter. And the nature of mind is to think, the nature of matter is to be extended. Um, so, two separate substances, right? One a thinking thing, one a physical thing. He said that these two things interact in our pineal gland. I mean, the pineal gland has been come under a lot of scrutiny over a number of years, both in terms of science and also metaphysics. Um, Metaphysics in terms of sort of New Age understanding of who and what we are, and metaphysics in terms of Descartes first pinpointing the pineal gland as the location where mind and body interact. So his solution to how our thoughts can move our bodies and how our bodies can influence our mind was called interactionism, that mind and body interact in the pineal gland. That's a problem. And the reason that's a problem is because of the issue of defining a person in terms of possessing two separate substances, one non-physical, mind, that operates under non-physical laws, the other physical, body, that operates under physical laws. So the question would be, how can a physical body contain or hold something non-physical? I'll wait for your response. I mean, the answer is that it just simply can't. If we define a person in terms of physical and non-physical, and then claim that those two things interact, thanks for playing. It just can't work that way. Don't define them that way from the get-go. Maybe there's another solution. But we tend to run around thinking of ourselves, again, in this pluralistic way, that we've got bodies, we've got minds, we've got spirits, we've got souls, there's a God that's distinct from everything, angels, again, on and on and on. Those things would not be capable of interacting. In fact, that's the other issue, is whatever the nature of God might be, the notion that God created a universe that is of substance, and if God is non-substantive, that God created a universe in time and space, and yet God is beyond time and space. I mean, this gets back to the criticism of Plato's forms that Aristotle made of Plato. Plato believed that there was a world of forms. There were the ideals of everything. So all the different tables we experience in this world, right, are subject to change and corruption, and they get destroyed over time, that sort of thing. But there's the ideal table in the land of the forms. And all of these sort of copies of tables and chairs and people and whatever in the world that we experience, all of these copies, they are in time and space, right? And they are in a constant process of change, but the forms are eternal. So I could know what a dinosaur is, even though I've never experienced one, right? I can know table, right? I can know what table is with my mind, even though my body might not be around any tables right now, right? Maybe I can even know justice, even though I've never experienced true justice, but somehow I know justice. And that's how I'm able to determine that certain things are not just, because of my concept, my knowledge of justice. This was Plato's notion. Aristotle came along and said, well, okay, so how can you get the world of subjective spatio-temporal objects from these eternal, objective, beyond time, beyond space forms? How does the one produce the other? Because from Plato's perspective, they're totally different, right? They're so different that one could not affect the other. You can destroy all the tables in the world, but the form table still exists, right? They're nothing alike at all, right? Eternal, not eternal. Perfect, imperfect, right? They're totally different. And yet Plato says the one comes from the other. How? I mean, how does that work? So, two, with God and the creation of the universe, right? How can that sort of being, God being sort of the form of everything, the perfect, the eternal, etc. See where we're going? Plato, God, the forms. How can God produce something, right, that is not like God, that is not of God? Produce something, and no need to get too existential here, right? But how can evil and sin, right, corruption and disease and all of this stuff come from a perfect being? And again, we can lay the blame on all kinds of things. There's about 17 answers to that question. None of them work, right? Sin, free will, etc. The devil made me do it. But God, if God created it all, right? If God created it all, and God is a perfect being, why wouldn't the creation of God be equally perfect? Either God's malicious, I don't want it to be perfect, I want you all to suffer, right? Or God's really not powerful enough, maybe, to create a reality without pain and suffering. But the metaphysical question is, how could there even be something less than God that came forth from God? I'll give you a little bit of time to think about that one. Okay, well, it's not an easy answer. So, pluralism, right? Lots of different essences, right, that operate under their own laws. How can any of them affect each other? How can a physical body have a spirit within it that's non-physical? Right? How can it have a soul within it if it's different than a spirit? What is a will anyway? Can you get a will transplant? Ooh, hurt my will today. Gotta go to the ER. I don't know. How can a divine being create a less than divine universe? Like, dang, couldn't quite pull off a really good one there, God. You know, it's like, unfortunately, the stuff you make is just like, it's got a lot of problems there. In fact, it was so bad he had like flood the whole world and start over again, right? So that's problematic, right? But it's problematic metaphysically. It's problematic theologically in other areas too. But the metaphysics of it, right? How can two separate essences that operate under different laws interact? It'd be like trying, I can set something on a table and push it across the table with my hand, but I can't turn a flashlight on, right, and push it with the light. They don't interact. One doesn't affect the other. This light is not operating in that moment in that way under physical laws. It's acting as waves apparently at that point, or if it is acting as particles, it's not strong enough to push anything, right? And that's a weak example because light can be experienced as particles, physical, or waves, kind of non-physical, vibration, energy, other things too. Um, so this moves us along to recognizing that the way we normally think about things metaphysically, pluralistically or dualistically, mind and body, right, divine, not divine, those are dualisms, that those may not, in fact, be the true nature of reality. We're used to talking about things that way, but just because we're used to talking about things that way doesn't make it so, right? If I had a mind of my own, I, you got a mind. Well, no, I got a brain. Do I have a mind inside my body? I don't know. If I move too fast, do I outrun my soul? My soul's like, "Ooh, what, you're going too fast," right? I mean, what keeps these things together? Is it some kind of sticky goo? If it is a sticky goo, then that means the soul is physical. It's interesting because Thomas Hobbes, a philosopher back in the day, when ghost busting and ghost hunting and seances and all that stuff was really popular, and people were hearing ghosts and seeing ghosts, he concluded that, well, then ghosts must be of the natural world somehow. In other words, they are causing a physical reaction. If you're hearing them, then they're creating sound waves that are vibrating your eardrums. If you're seeing specters, right, then they're creating light waves that are refracting off your eyeballs, right, and producing images. So ghosts must be of somehow of the natural world, a part of this reality in some sense, not the way we normally think of ghosts, right? If you ever saw the movie Ghost, I think it was Ghost, right? Patrick Swayze, he had a real hard time like moving things, right? Well, the point is, if you're really non-physical, you'd never be able to. You just like go right through things, right? Because you're non-physical, you wouldn't be able to move anything at all, unless there's some other explanation. And that brings us along to monism, a oneism. If there's only one essential reality, then everything can interact. So think about a couple of examples of that. One that you may be familiar with, yin and yang. Yin and yang are two aspects of Tao, but there's only one reality, and that's Tao. Yin and yang are just two aspects of it. So yin and yang definitely interact, right? But they're both of the same nature of Tao. Tao is a higher principle. Yin and yang, totally different. We define them totally differently. Masculine, feminine, inhalation, exhalation, right? Tall and short, left and right, on, totally different. But they interact. One, in fact, becomes the other over time. How can that be if they're totally different? Well, because they're both part of a higher reality, which is Tao, right? This is two aspects of one reality. Prakriti and Purusha. Ooh, two new terms you might want to look up. Out of the Hindu tradition, Prakriti is the physical stuff of the universe, like Descartes' matter. Purusha is the spiritual stuff of the universe, right? Kind of like Descartes' mind. Totally different, right? In fact, so different that according to the philosophical tradition in India, those two arise sort of at the same time, side by side, and are never really able to affect each other directly. But there's sort of these indirect effects, you might say. Well, you're fudging on me a little bit, ain't you? Right? And are they affecting each other or not? Right? It's a metaphysical question. Well, from the Hindu perspective, those, much like yin and yang, are part of a higher reality, which for the Hindus is known as Brahman. So there's only one thing that exists. That's Brahman, according to Hinduism. And Prakriti and Purusha, the physical and the spiritual, are just two separate aspects of Brahman. So they can affect each other, even though they're metaphysically separate in one sense. They are still part of a higher monism. So they're just two aspects of one ultimate reality. Monisms. Nice. So, turning to God, all right, if God creates a universe, what theologians call ex nihilo, meaning out of nothing, like God just sort of poofs things into existence, and that those things he poofs into existence are essentially different than him, then that's problematic. It's problematic in all kinds of ways theologically. An infinite being that at some point creates a universe with reason, the question would be, right, if you got a good reason for doing everything you do, why wouldn't you have had a good reason to have done that the day before you did it? Or like a million years before you did it? I mean, God's infinite. Or like a zillion years before you did it. Like, there's no need to create a universe. There's no need to create a universe. There's no need. Ooh, there's a good reason to create a universe now. Did something change in God? Did he get bored? I mean, if so, then that's not normally the way we understand God. The other way to understand it, though, and this comes out of Plotinus, what a brilliant mind Plotinus was that the universe is an emanation of the one, as Plotinus calls it. Right. So, and the same thing with Hinduism, really. In fact, Plotinus was influenced by Hinduism and Buddhism to some extent. Um, so think about a sun. Any sun, maybe our sun, but the sun in the sky. Does it create light as something separate from what it is, or does it emanate light? Right? Does the light that comes forth from the sun, and is it an emanation? Does the sun choose to create light, or does light come forth simply because that's the nature of the sun? So does God will to create a universe? And by the way, as long as the sun exists, light's coming forth from it. So does God choose to create a universe at some point in time? Or does the universe come forth from God as a monism, so that everything in the universe is of God? Right? It's an emanation of God, much like light is an emanation from the sun. Now we're getting into a land of possibilities, that really open up. Because again, from a monistic perspective, if everything is essentially of one nature rather than all of these different things, then everything can influence each other metaphysically. This opens up the door to understanding not only metaphysics, but metaphysics as a part of the philosophical discipline per se, but metaphysics in the sense of almost like New Age metaphysics, like practicing spirituality, regardless of what that might be or mean, and how what we can do truly affects everything else. Whether we're talking about mind, body, spirit, etc. Again, if those things are separate substances, separate essences, there will be no effect. But if there is a higher monistic reality and all these things are a part of that, then they're just different aspects of that one reality, whether we consider that to be Brahman or Tao or God or Spirit or the Logos or the consciousness of the universe or vibration or energy. And even those answers come with problems, but also solutions, depending on how you examine monisms, right? But let monism be the word for the day. And I'm going to, in fact, today I'm offering a class on it's Metaphysics 1. Well, we'll be covering this topic along with others in terms of understanding metaphysics and how we can get to the point of really understanding how we as individuals living spiritual lives, whatever that might mean, can again have a direct influence on the world around us. How can we not? Well, we can't. If there are separate essences in all of these different ways, nothing would be able to affect anything else at all. But if they are of one essence, monism, then obviously they can affect each other. So whether you're able to attend the class today, what is today? Saturday, December the something or other in the year, I have no clue. I just don't keep up with things like that. 2020. Okay, I thought of COVID. It's like 2020. So if you're able to attend the class today, that's great. If not, I'll be offering this again. So hopefully you'll be able to take it at some point. Again, it's a lot more to it than just what we covered in a brief 20, 25-minute session. But it's worth investigating. So y'all take care and hope to see you soon.